We have had to watch some very bad Chargers offensive lines through the years, but it looks like in 2023, the unit could be a major strength.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 5 seasons or 7 seasons, but this is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Getting close to 6 seasons with Locked On and also 8 seasons covering this team in general. But thank you guys, as always, for making this your first listen. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also find the show and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Today, we are going to talk about the offensive line. We're going to talk about how the offensive line could be a major strength. Then we're going to talk about the interior of the offensive line. We all know how important Corey Lindsley is. And then we're going to take a look at the depth and why the depth is a big concern.
It is a concern, and then this feels like a group that could go a lot of different directions, right? Like, I think we're very high on it, and I think that we are very excited. This is a position group I'm very excited to talk about, but like, it feels like there's a lot of variance. It feels like there's some volatility to it. But today's episode is brought to you guys by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. David, I'm excited to talk about this group because I think there's a lot of things I really like about it, but I'm also banking on some things to kind of fall into place for this group, for them to get to where I think they should be, right? And if you're looking at where the rankings are kind of around the league of places that have put the rankings out, Pro Football Focus had them as the 9th best line heading into 2023. If you go to Sharp Football, it was 12th. Pro Football Network was a flawed argument throughout their whole thing, but they had them 12th as well. But it seems like there's a consensus. Hey, this should be an above average unit, and it does feel like if things go right, like this should be a top 10 offensive line. And if that's the case, that would be a gigantic win for this Chargers offense, considering all the other pieces they have surrounding it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my goodness, have we seen some really, really bad offensive lines with the Chargers over the last several years? I mean,
poor Phillip Rivers.
Turnstiles at different positions, like trying to find that stalwart left tackle, trying to find a tackle in general. I mean, that was a big, big problem for the Chargers. So to sit here in 2023 and say, hey, I got an all-pro left tackle, okay? I have an all-pro center. I have a up-and-coming young right tackle that I just gave a new contract. I just rewarded with a new contract. And I have a couple of guards that are young and hungry, and I feel really, really good about that. To me, Daniel, sounds like a really good mix and a really good recipe for a strong offensive line.
And that being said, though, there's going to have to be a lot of improvements from the line that we saw in 2022. Because, I mean, one thing is Matt Filer's out. Now Jamaree Salyer is in. We saw him at tackle. Now we have to see him at guard. Zion Johnson will have to improve as well. We're going to see him switch back to the left side like he was at Boston College. That's all going to play a factor, but like it just simply wasn't good enough in 2022 for different reasons. Rashawn Slater misses 14 games. That's a huge part of it. Corey Linsley in and out of the lineup at times. Trey Pipkins in and out of the lineup at times. And guys that weren't ready to step in had to step in. But if you're looking at just what went wrong, I mean, as far as running the football, the thing part of this that doesn't get talked about enough wasn't good enough. If you looked at their Football Outsiders numbers, 20% of their runs got stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. 26th ranked run blocking unit according to DVOA Football Outsiders, and 27th in second level yards, and which is what was created for running backs at the second level. So I think that Kellen Moore, obviously, hopefully we see him in the scheme help with that a little bit. And I just hope that we see, this kind of youth movement all kind of click in. And if they can find that kind of chemistry that they should have the chance to do during this training camp. Like, it does feel like it should be a top 10 unit. Like, that doesn't feel like a stretch, but like it also feels like it's kind of one piece away, one thing going wrong away from kind of unraveling again.
Yeah, no, I mean, this offensive line, I think that it has all of the elements that you need for them to run the football effectively and to be a team that can impose their will. Like, they have some guys that have some really incredible strength. I mean, Rashawn Slater is one of the freakishly strongest left tackles in the league. Like, this guy really moves people out of the way. I think Zion Johnson, you saw some things last year where he was able to really uproot guys, and he was really able to, have a strong anchor and to be able to hold his own against guys. And then Jamaree Salyer, I think we saw a lot of that as well. I think when Trey Pipkins is healthy, I think he is able to do it. And definitely Corey Lindsley, he's just an all-around really, really good football player. So, I mean, anything you ask him to do, if he's healthy, like, he can definitely provide that for you. I think there's just a good mix of young offensive line with some veterans in there. I just feel like these guys have the intelligence and they have the ability to go out there and run the football a lot better, and they need to. They have to be able to run the football when the other team knows they're going to be able to, and still be able to get their job done.
Yeah, and running the football is going to be hugely important, and that should be such a boost for an offense that just didn't do it well enough last year. But at the same time, though, protecting Justin Herbert's the number one priority, right? And last year, he was one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the NFL, and a lot of that's due to injuries, right? Guys like Foster Sherrill getting on the field, Will Clapp getting on the field a lot, the backups that we'll talk about later on in the show. But it still has to get a lot better, and there are certain reasons to believe that they will, but none other than Rashawn Slater coming back. I think, there's nothing that compares to that as far as kind of things you're banking on to improve this offensive line from 2022 to 2023. And that is like one of the most fun storylines for me, and maybe it might not be fun for other people. It's not a sexy position to talk about, obviously, but like getting Rashawn Slater back is like one of the things I'm looking forward to most, because that dude is just so freaking good. And I think he also can elevate the play around him.
Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone needs to remember how good Rashawn Slater is. Okay, 1,116 snaps, 752 pass blocking snaps, only 4 sacks allowed, 6 hits, and only 26 pressures. And, of course, that was en route to a second-team All-Pro nod as a rookie. Okay, so that just means that he was one of the top 2 offensive tackles, left tackles in the NFL that year. And then before he got hurt, he was in that kind of same place. 175 snaps, 113 pass block snaps, only 1 sack and 3 pressures allowed. By all accounts, he was en route to another fantastic all-pro type level of season. So to get that guy back who, and I think this perfectly illustrates how complete of a player he is, his run block grade in 2021 was a 80.2. His pass block grade was a 80.3. That's just the complete nature of his game. This is a guy that you can leave on an island. He can take away the team's best pass rusher, and you don't have to worry about adding extra protections to help him. He can do it all on his own. He wants to do it on his own, and he is more than capable of doing it. So to have that just security blanket, that ability, that comfort level to be able to say, hey, Rashawn, go do your job and not have to worry about it. Yeah. That's such a huge strength, and something that, although Jamaree Salyer played admirably, the Chargers sorely missed, and it's going to be really good to have back.
He was great. I mean, yeah, he allowed 1 pressure per game last year. Like, that's insane to do as a left tackle in the NFL. I mean, he's the guy I'm worried least about, even coming off of a major injury. I just have no doubt he tried to come back in the playoffs last year. Like, that he's going to be back and better than ever. I have no concern about, and I hope, that's another thing too, is like we were talking about running the football. It seemed like the Chargers last year failed to have a single strength, failed to have something, a bread and butter, like Kellen Moore's talked about a lot, right? Like, he's going to give them that bread and butter. He's going to give these guys less to think about and more just time to actually just play and react and like not have to think as much. And I think that's a huge part of being able to kind of get to where you need to be, find the landmarks in the running game. And I also think that just combining Zion Johnson and Rashawn Slater, that gives you a strength. 2+ run blockers now on the same side of the formation. I think if you have those 2 guys out there, those are 2 guys. Hopefully you can find kind of some consistent plays where it's like, hey, you need to go in this situation. You have 2 guys that are very, very hard to stop.
Really strong, really athletic, really smart football players, both of them. Coming from Boston College and Northwestern, I feel like that is a duo that can really get going, and really when they find that chemistry and they find that rhythm, that's a pair you're going to want to run behind. I mean, when you need those 3rd and short, 4th and short situations, you want to run behind your big behemoth on the left side, and I think they're going to do that a lot this year.
Well, and that's assuming, that Zion Johnson can get in there and fit in better at left guard than he did last year at right guard, making another transition right after we saw him go through the growing pains that we saw him go through as a rookie. And I think the interior offensive line and the performance of that group especially with Corey Lindsley being on the field and elevating those guys around him, and also being able to help Justin Herbert with everything he helps him with. It's going to be one of the major storylines and one of the major things that decides whether this is going to be a really good group in 2023 or if it's just another season with us lamenting, right, and just saying, hey, this is why you have to invest resources into this group because it's so important. So we're going to talk about Corey Lindsley and the guard situation. Jamaree Salyer in at right guard, Zion Johnson in at left guard. Now, how will that all play out? We're getting into that coming up right after this. Before we do get into that, though, I do need to tell you guys about LinkedIn Jobs. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to do. There's no excuse not to do it. It's for free. And let me tell you that my wife is a recruiter, right? That means part of her life is getting commission. So not only just getting a person is always the right move, right? You got to get the right person. You want to get the dude, the person, woman, man, whoever, that's going to stick around. It's not always about just filling a spot. It's about finding the right fit, finding the person that is going to stay there. And that's what LinkedIn Jobs brings to the table. I mean, I wish my wife always talked about me the way that she talks about LinkedIn Jobs. And they have simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. And it's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the quality candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This offensive line is going to be such a major focus for the Chargers and have a major impact on whether this Chargers offense can kind of get to the goals we want to see from it, right? Because it's all good and fun to talk about the offense being more vertical and opening things up. You need time in the pocket to do it, right? You have to give Justin Herbert the time to let these guys get deeper down the field and to make these big plays. So it is going to be nice that we're going to see new play calling and things like that. But even though he played 14 games last year, David, I don't think we saw the Chargers offensive line get to where they should have been. A lot of that had to do with Corey Lindsley only playing in 14 games and missing major snaps in a few other games last season. And it's nothing against Will Clapp. I thought Will Clapp actually played fine. I think he was actually a really big addition to this team this offseason, just having some veteran help behind in the interior. But there's just no replacing Corey Lindsley on this team. Like, if he's not out there for you, if this, knee issue that he had in 2022 continues to hamper him in 2023, it's hard to imagine this line gets to where it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a force multiplier. I mean, in the middle of that offensive line, he's such a cerebral player. He's such a huge asset to Justin Herbert as, he has his back to the rest of the formation when they're in the huddle. He's scanning what the defense is doing. He's trying to set those protections. He's trying to take that stuff off of Justin Herbert's plate so he can go out there and get his team in the right play and be able to play quicker, think, and not have to think and go out there and go execute. And Corey Lindsley is just such a stalwart, such a fixture in the middle. He's a guy that he's going to make everyone around him better. He's going to improve the game of the two guards that are on each side of him because of his experience, because of how much football he has played. Like, there's not a lot of things that he has not seen. So Corey Lindsley being healthy and being on the football field is one of the major keys to be able to get this offensive line to go and reach the massive potential that it has.
It has an effect on Justin Herbert. It has an effect on the players around him, and it just has an effect on just the overall chemistry of that group. And I mean, especially when you're talking about the running game, especially when you're talking about passing off stunts and twists and things like that, exotic blitzes, who's taking who, all of those things are helped with Corey Lindsley on the field. And it also helps that, the dude had 858 pass blocking snaps and gave up 0 sacks last year, right? So he was easily the highest graded pass protector on Pro Football Focus. He had a 90.2 grade. The next closest person had an 82 grade. He was #1 in pass blocking efficiency. He only allowed 5 pressures in 14 games. Like, that is just unheard of numbers. It's crazy.
Not only that, Daniel, but since joining the Chargers, Corey Lindsley has given up 0 sacks and 15 pressures in 1,276 pass blocking snaps.
Crazy.
That is pure, unadulterated dominance from your center, Corey Lindsley. That it doesn't get much better than that.
Especially when you consider the Chargers, basically been throwing more than anyone else. So I like Will Clapp. It's fine. It's just you can't replace him. And I think one of the major things you're hoping is that he can elevate those guys around him. If you're looking at the biggest question marks on the Chargers offensive line, a lot of how this unit does is going to depend on how Jamaree Salyer and Zion Johnson fill in their new roles, right?
Yeah.
Zion Johnson had a bumpy rookie season in some games, but improved, right? He gave up 40 pressures last year, which, he played the third most amount of snaps out of any guard in the NFL. So that's a very important thing when you're hearing these stats, right?
Yeah, 1,184 snaps. That's a
Exactly, right? But he was 50th in pass blocking efficiency out of anyone with over 200 pass blocking snaps. He had 6 penalties last year. He gave up 5 sacks. There's a lot of numbers you could say, okay, well, those aren't great, right? But he switched sides, which is, not an easy thing to do. He made the leap to the next level playing guard, which is also not an easy thing to do. We're hoping, David, that being back on the left side, being where he was dominant at Boston College, being next to Rashawn Slater and having Corey Lindsley on the other side, we're really hoping that gets another level out of Zion Johnson. And to be honest, the Chargers kind of need it, even though I thought he wasn't terrible as a rookie.
No, and also I think we all have to remind ourselves to not have the unbelievable, unrealistic expectations that every single offensive lineman coming out is going to be like Rashawn Slater and be an all-pro. So I think that was a little bit unfair. But for Zion Johnson, I do feel like there was flashes of him really looking like an NFL guard, like a guy who was able to, stand up and really be able to stand defensive linemen up. But I feel like the definition of his year was up and down. I feel like there were spurts, but I think one of the things I did see from Zion is he would make mistakes, but he would learn from those mistakes and he would not repeat them. And I feel like that's why there's one of the reasons why I feel like Zion Johnson, his leap from year 1 to year 2, I think is going to be significant because I feel like he's a guy. He's just a guy that's going to be able to analyze his play, be able to see where he went wrong, and be able to take that criticism and then act on it and make it better. And I feel like he's the type of guy that's going to be able to do that. So although it's up and down play, I think there's reasons to feel very confident that he's going to be able to have a nice jump in his sophomore season.
I think he will. I think the nice thing is he was already an above average run blocker. For all the eligible players, out of the 64 eligible players, guys with more than 200 run blocking snaps, right? He was the 13th best run blocking guard last year.
There you go.
And if you're talking about 64, that's basically all of the starting guards in the NFL. There's 2 on each team, 32 teams, right? So in the top half of guards, run blocking wise. Now you're going to put him next to another dude who in 2021 was the 6th best run blocking tackle and 3rd best left tackle out of him, Rashawn Slater.
Yep.
Now maybe you got something cooking, right? But I like to think he's going to improve. Jamaree Salyer, though, that one's going to be just as hard to kind of figure out what to project him with this season because it's another one where you're like, okay, well, I saw him play left tackle as a rookie in the NFL and not skip a beat. He was a great left tackle at Georgia for a national championship team. But now he's playing right guard, right? So, that is another huge, transition for him and another huge thing that kind of has to go right if this offensive line is really going to be a top 10 unit.
Yeah, and I think, kudos to Jamaree Salyer, and I think we have definitely many times talked about how important his play at left tackle was. But I feel like, some of the things that gave him some trouble at tackle, like the speed and the twitchiness and the quickness, I think those are some of the things that get mitigated a little bit with him moving inside. And I feel like you look at Jamaree, exactly, you hope, right? But you look at Jamaree Salyer and you're like, man, that really looks like a guard to me. Like his posture, his stature, his strength, his brute strength, it's real. He's definitely a guy that looks mean. He's going to run people over. But I feel like, yes, and we can sit here and say his game is better suited for guard, but he still has to go out there and do it, right?
It's what they originally drafted him to be, right?
Definitely.
That's what they thought he was going to be coming out.
And he did play it. He played it in college too. So he does have some experience at guard. But hey, this is the NFL, right? This is a completely different animal. But hey, he was able to come in on basically, no notice, play a very, very good left tackle in this league. So that just gives you a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to plug in at guard and really just hit the ground running.
Well, yeah, and he had a lot of, he had Matt Filer next to him who was struggling too, last year, right? And I think that's the other part of this is he doesn't necessarily have to be a top 10 guard in the league, right? But it's not hard for me to believe that he could be better than Matt Filer, right?
Yeah.
Or at least that Jamaree Salyer will be better at right guard this year than Zion Johnson was last year. And Zion Johnson at left guard can be a better left guard than Matt Filer was. So that's really the biggest addition and subtraction, right? Matt Filer out at left guard. Now you slide in Jamaree Salyer at right guard, move Zion Johnson over. It's moving parts, but you just have to hope that this group can stay healthy enough during training camp and have that proper time to get together and find some chemistry. I think Jamaree Salyer will be good, but like it's just gonna be very hard for me to doubt that dude. Like I just truly think if they need him to do it, he's gonna do it, and he's going to do it well. And I do think it does better fit his skill set, but it doesn't mean it won't be a transition period, right? It doesn't mean it might not be a little bit of a rough start, and he has to kind of work his way into it. So it's you have to have the proper expectations for it too. But all of those storylines aside, the Chargers answered their biggest, offseason question, or one of them, when they brought back Trey Pipkins to be their right tackle. They gave him a 3-year deal. Can he be that guy? I mean, the thing is, David, he was quietly already pretty dang good in 2022 and doesn't get nearly enough credit for it. So we're going to talk about that. But why behind him, things start to get a lot more blurry, and the questions about depth on this team are very, very real, coming up right after this. David, this offensive line, to me, I mean, I always love talking about the offensive line, especially when there's guys to be excited about, right? Like, I mean, there's so many seasons where you just went in and you had no idea, but like the everydayers know. The everydayers have been here through the good and the bad for the offensive lines, and it's been a lot more bad than it has been good. But that's just for today's show. We will be with you guys the rest of the week, because we are back up to 5 days throughout the rest of the season. Until next June, when we hit our off season again. We are your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And this week, we have training camp battles, training camp storylines. We have more position groups we're breaking down. We have fan mail stuff we're going to get into as well. So much more packed for you guys as training camp comes up next week. And we're so excited to cover that as well. Maybe even Justin Herbert will sign his contract extension this week. Who knows? But one of the guys protecting him, and one of the guys that's been trusted now to protect him for the next 3 seasons and kind of completing, this front 5 for the Chargers all being locked up for a long time now, is Trey Pipkins, one of the key internal free agents the Chargers had going into free agency. They brought him back, David, and I think it was a huge win. I loved the move then, and I'm very bullish on Trey Pipkins hopefully being healthy in 2023 and really proving why he got that contract.
This is just a great story, and I think with Trey Pipkins, and we'd be the first to tell you, we gave him plenty of stuff that he needed to work on. We were never shy about letting him know and letting everyone else know that he was not good enough. But to his
the Chargers
credit,
used a 3rd-round pick on him too, right? So it's like he kind of came in with unrealistic expectations because Tom Telesco picked him out of nowhere, right? One of those classic Tom Telesco 3rd-round picks where it's like he didn't ask to be picked in the 3rd round. He found a Division II guy from Sioux Falls that was a totally project kind of a player, right? That's not his fault. But to see where he is now, David, it's kind of like Michael Davis. Like, it would have been so hard for you to tell me 3 years ago that Trey Pipkins was going to turn into what we saw from him last year, even battling through injuries.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. It's an unbelievable story from a guy that was from a very small school nobody had heard of, a guy that was probably picked way before he ever should have. And he took a couple of really bad seasons, went and rededicated himself, went and got help, and really paid it. It really paid off for him.
Yeah.
Like he went out, did what he needed to do, and it was fantastic. The Chargers stuck with him, to their credit as well, and they reward him with a new contract. He fought through injuries. The Chargers like that in their players. If you're able to go out there and play and be out there for your team, they're going to reward you at the end of the day. I think, even with the reward, the contract still looks like a great value. And yes, Daniel, he went out there and he played really, really good football last year.
He was one of only 6 tackles that had at least 500 pass blocking snaps and gave up 2 sacks or less, right? So, he was tied for 3rd as far as, sacks allowed last year for offensive tackles that had at least 500 pass blocking snaps.
586 pass block snaps.
Only 28 pressures allowed. I know that those numbers are kind of hard to put into context, but basically he gave up a pressure once every 21 snaps and a sack every 293 snaps, right? This is a dude who was a total liability, a dude who, basically had to sit on the sidelines and watch Storm Norton play opposite of Rashawn Slater in 2021. That's how far this dude has come.
A guy you didn't even want on special teams, right?
Yeah. I mean, David, there's 64 starting NFL tackles in the league, right? And we know who the top tier are, right?
Sure.
Trey Pipkins in 2022 was the 15th best in pass blocking efficiency, right? Like the top half of the top half. Like he was already in above average, really good tackle in pass protection, right? And I think we know that the run blocking actually got hurt a lot when he was hurt. He was even on the injury report up through the Jacksonville game. He didn't have a great game in the playoffs, but like he was dealing with that knee injury the whole season and still put together an above average season at tackle. And David, I mean, if you would have told me any season, you know, over the last 10 seasons, hey, I'm going to assure you the Chargers are going to get above average play from right tackle, that's never been a given for this team. There's a lot of Trent Scotts and Sam Tevies, right? Even Joe Barksdale before you get to this. And the Brian Bulaga saga, right? Like, it was such a sore spot. And, like, I know people were skeptical of the Trey Pipkins signing, but to have that guy in your building, to get him as the 10th highest paid right tackle, according to, you know, Spotrac in the league, like it seems crazy to me. Like it was a great deal, and I'm bullish on Trey Pipkins. I think in a healthy season, he's going to show exactly why he got that contract.
I agree.
Then it gets a lot sketchier, David, because the one thing that both of us are very concerned about, the biggest question for this team is if the depth on this team can hold up, because we talked about Will Clapp. I like him, but he's just not Corey Lindsley.
Right.
Still think it was an important hire. But now, right now, David, like the swing tackle for this team is either between Foster Sarell or Jordan McFadden, who is a 5th-round pick this year, another tackle that they're trying to convert to guard. Like, it's going to be very hard to talk me into kind of having blind faith in the unit that's behind what we feel like is a pretty good starting 5.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of teams out there that can say, hey, if one of my top 5 guys goes down, there's going to be a big problem. But I mean, you got to look at what Foster Sarell did last year. I mean, he played 250 snaps and he started, pretty much 3 football games, 2 complete ones and one where he took over and he played most of that game. But 186 pass blocking snaps, 18 pressures, 6 hits, and 2 sacks. And his pass block grade was not great, but his run block grade was horrible. And so for that, that's the guy right there. That if Rashawn Slater gets hurt or if Trey Pipkins gets hurt, Foster Sarell is going to be the first guy in the game. At least he was last year. And hey, for Foster Sarell, at least you like to see that he was hooking up with Duke Manyweather, the O-line, masterminds, guru, O-line guru. Hopefully, he was able to get some good work in, and he's able to improve his game because he has the measurables, right? He has the size, he has the weight that you look for. He was a highly touted kind of prospect, but I mean, from what we've seen from him, I mean, it hasn't been good enough. So one injury away from that guy being on the field a lot. I don't know at this point right now, before we could get into training camp, you can feel really good about that proposition.
I mean, there's 4 guys that we imagine will be in the mix to some degree. It's Foster Sarell, it's Will Clapp, it's Jordan McFadden, the 5th-round pick, and it's Brendan Hymas, who, another guy. It's just impossible to feel like who of those guys do you feel super confidently? And I mean, think you say Jordan McFadden just because he's the one you haven't seen,
That's
get
right.
cooked. Like he's the one guy you haven't seen get cooked on the NFL level because he hasn't played there yet. But it's just really risky to go in thinking you have another Jamaree Salyer and Jordan McFadden. I like Jordan McFadden. He was Dane Brugler's 8th-ranked guard in the draft. There's a lot of people who had him much higher as a 6th-round pick or 5th-round pick, but still, it's very unusual what you saw from Jamaree Salyer. And I think it's nice that hopefully the Chargers, seeing what happened with Jamaree Salyer, will give him a true shot at being the swing tackle and maybe the first guard on the field, right? But it's just hard to assume it at this point. He is one of the guys I'll be watching most closely.
Oh, definitely.
Brendan Hymas, 2021 draft pick, 5th-round pick, another tackle converting to guard. He got in for 18 total snaps last year, and he gave up 5 pressures and 1 penalty. He has 23 career snaps. It's just impossible to feel good about. Like, maybe he's improved a lot, but the Chargers have seemed very afraid to put him on the field, and the very small sample size we've seen of him on the field kind of show you why they've been afraid to put him on the field. So, like, it's just tough. Like, Jordan McFadden's the guy I'm most hopeful for out of this group, but it does feel like this is a group that's a couple injuries away, David, from having a lot of guys you don't really want to see on the field have to go on the field. But Jordan McFadden is definitely the guy that's like, hey, he's the hope. Let's hope that he can do something good in training camp, or we just see a much improved version of, Foster Sarell, maybe Brendan Hymas. But overall, I'm very, very confident in this group. I love the excitement of the fact that the Chargers could have a really good offensive line.
Yes.
But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. For the Everydayers, we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. We're going to be getting some fan mail stuff soon, some more offensive and defensive position groups, and some training camp battles and storylines as well. But to make sure you don't miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And you also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD, as well as the show's page at Locked On LAC. And you can also find us at Locked On Chargers on Instagram and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. We appreciate you guys as always, even when we're going on vacation and everything we had going on, still being back here and supporting. We love you guys, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.